let's give it another minute. Just thank you guys for joining and we'll get started really soon. So
Yeah, and as you said before, right, this was set up as a meeting, not as a webinar. So
yeah, yeah, definitely. I encourage you guys, if you are available, turn your cameras on. If you're not, it's okay. But yeah, the reason Vlad and I created this was to have an interactive, collaborative session. We didn't really want to do it just a webinar of hearing both of us talk the whole time, but so we want to just chat through and talk to you guys if you have any big questions or really hear about your experience and what you're going through. That I think will be really valuable.
I agree. I agree.
Cool. Well, I think it's 1:03 now, so we can go ahead and get kicked off. Thank you, everyone. I think this meeting hopefully should be recording. Let me just check.
It appears to
Yes,
be.
it is. It is. Okay, good. Because the last webinar I did, I completely forgot to record it, and then people were asking me about it. So, yeah. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Data Cloud, making everything better. I'm Chad Lieberman. I'm the founder of Future Future. And I have along with me Vlad Silak, the CTO at CarbonX. And we're really excited to just have this power hour talking about Data Cloud with you. The whole point of this session is just to talk through some of our the experience implementing Data Cloud. Really, honestly, we want to talk about how to get started quickly, but also build a foundation for the future. We know talking with a lot of customers right now, there's a lot of challenges they face in finding out the right use cases and how to get started. And so we kind of want to get over that analysis paralysis and start to explore how do you define the value with Data Cloud, define your use cases, and get going quickly. So with that being said, let's jump into it. We're going to really talk about three things today, just kind of what's going on overall in the industry from a data lens and why we think data cloud's important. We also want to just talk about like what we're hearing on the ground today, like from everybody in our conversations in terms of the biggest blockers and challenges with data cloud. And then we're going to talk to you about some of our experience and really the four pillars we think to have a successful implementation to help define how do you understand the value that Data Cloud's going to bring and the strategy. There's so many different use cases it can apply to. How do you actually start on that? How do you look at the data you need and the right capabilities? And then finally, some best practices around getting the right people and the planning involved. And I think we'll then leave it up to a bit of a Q&A. Again, feel free to stop us, put some comments in the chat, turn on your video. Let's, make this an interactive session. So I'm really excited to you really introduce Vlad. I'm sure everybody knows Vlad. I remember at the one of the conferences we were at in Melbourne, someone just passed. I was sitting next to Vlad. Someone's like, "Hey, can I get a picture with you?" So I was like, "Yeah, he's got that." Infamous, from all the partner enablement sessions he's done across the years. He's now the founder and CTO of CarbonX. Vlad, maybe just do a quick intro about some of your experience, and thank you for joining me with on this one.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, yeah, thank you for kind of inviting me to have this chat because I think the idea was really, really good and timely. We both you and I we've been into a number of conversations. It's a very hot topic, and I guess from my perspective, bringing up a bit of a 11 years and a bit at Salesforce, leading like the most recent years were really focused around leading the enablement program for Data Cloud globally, being integrated into part of the, I guess, more product team or the team that interlaces with the product quite closely. And privileged and lucky to be working with a number of consultants across the globe, number of initial pilot customers, supporting some of these initial implementations and extrapolating a lot of learnings and what worked, what didn't, so that when we can formulate a better enablement program strategy and kind of certification at the time to build this up. So it was really good time and fantastic experience altogether. And as we were just talking about at the start of the call, I've been doing similar thing for marketing cloud portfolio of products. So really kind of like marketing and data with kind of two things that I guess were my forte at Salesforce. And this is ultimately what I thought we will bring into the world of consulting partners as we started into our own company altogether with three of my partners. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, Vlad, I'm just excited to talk to you about your experience on enabling, partners in Data Cloud and Marketing Cloud, but also just some of your experience in delivery and what we both have gone through going through Data Cloud implementations. Just a brief intro of myself. I've been working in Salesforce for 13 years. Previously, ran the Marketing Cloud business at Accenture, and now founded a company, a Salesforce partner called Future, super focused on helping companies with Data Cloud, agents, and AI and Marketing Cloud. And yeah, super excited for you guys to be here and be here with us today. So I guess just wanted to take a step back of like what's going on in the industry and specifically in terms of data, because this is things we hear like all the time. Most organizations we talk to have too much data. They're drowning in data, and I say starving for insights. And what that means is like most companies on average have about 15 plus applications at their business. I mean, data warehouses, CRMs, marketing platforms, digital experiences. But like one of the biggest problems that I see is that a lot of these things are really disconnected. So they're not integrated. It's very complex to integrate them, and they just don't talk to each other. And I think like what that leads to is a really impersonalized customer experience. If someone calls into the contact center, we don't know what they've ordered. We don't know what pages on our website they've visited. We don't know what marketing communications they've sent. That we've always thought about that customer 360 is that holy grail, and I think it's evolved in what it means, and in terms of the volume of data, the number of data sources we have, and it's just a harder thing. And I think that's a big challenge today. On average, about 30% of data is actually being utilized. So in terms of like deriving insights in decision making, we all know that like data-driven marketing in terms of like how we can drive more automation based upon behaviors, based upon triggers and events is so important, but actually not a lot of that data is utilized to drive insights or segmentation, predictive modeling. And I think the other really interesting thing going on right now is that like 80% of data is super unstructured. So, that's trapped in like meeting notes, PDFs, documents, other things, which I find just an incredible stat because there's a lot of information that organizations collect that's just not usable. I don't know, Vlad, are you seeing anything else, in some of the customers you're working with around some of the common, themes around data and some of the
Yeah.
challenges they have?
Absolutely. I think it's, to the point, like the number of data across, like data sources across the company is quite large. And we looked into like some small organizations and you look into some of the large ones that we work with today. And yeah, the fact that the challenge to bring it all together is very absolutely top of mind. And despite the fact that the varieties of technologies are available, it still seems a pretty big challenge because I do remember the days in the marketing when we were encouraging customers to bring all the data they can into the marketing ecosystem so they can start making some intelligent decisions, better personalization. And now we're finding that this is effectively, we've got so much information that it's really hard to kind of go through that and figure out what actually makes sense, what is useful and what is not. So
Yeah,
that is an absolute 100% true story.
yeah. And I guess like the kind of big impact of what I think this means is that it's leading to poor customer experiences because data is very siloed, lost revenue, and expensive operations. And every single company that we work with, I think there's where you're at today, and it's also where you want to get tomorrow. And I think having a unified data foundation is the best way to drive everything you're trying to achieve. I think if I look at a lot of companies today, they have very siloed data. Their experiences are quite disconnected. They're very also manual in terms of how they maybe build a marketing audience. Like they have to go to an IT team to build a segment and drop a file. Their workflows are really automated. Uh, AI, as we know, like having great data is the foundation to good contextualized AI. Being able to retrieve data from your data library, knowledge articles, other PDFs and sources makes it much more contextual when that's actually unified and accessible. And I also think that like we're also seeing a lot of companies having issues around data privacy and with new privacy legislation and things like that. But I think having that unified data foundation drives everything. And those that actually do have a more unified data foundation can really help increase their revenues by providing more personalized experiences to customers, reducing operational costs, and driving better experiences. So, our view, and I'm sure Vlad shares the same, is that you have to get your data in order to make everything else better, right?
And it and it's not to
Yeah.
say it's not a new concept, right? Like a lot of these postulates are pretty much something that we've been working in the consulting space with customers for a number of years. Like most organizations want to have that unified data platform and they want to have unified customer insights and being able to do it. AI
Hmm.
certainly added a flavor on top of that, and it's a whole new dimension. It's almost
Yeah.
its own workspace and space to kind of think through. But yeah, ultimately, all of these things have been there for a long while.
Yeah. And I think, I see a lot of organizations starting to, we've, build a lot of that data lakehouse architecture. But one of the problems with that is the accessibility of that into other applications. And so this is maybe you guys have seen this, but and maybe have some familiarity of what Data Cloud is in terms of a context of Salesforce. Um, Maybe give me a thumbs up if you've seen this before or are aware of this. But I actually wanted to break it down a little bit because when you have Data Cloud at the foundation, it is a part of the core Salesforce platform that allows you to obviously bring in data across your entire ecosystem. And so if I look at these kind of different rings, Data Cloud obviously allows you to unify different, structured and unstructured data, data from all different applications like a data lakehouse, behavioral data, your CRM marketing service, all across your ecosystem, and actually harmonize it into a unified customer identity that allows you to then, have better insights, better audience segmentation, better analytics about who your customers are. And, once that data is unified, the whole thing about Data Cloud is it's making everything better. So every application that you have, whether that be on Salesforce or something else, allows you to actually have better sales insights or drive more proactive service or drive better personalized marketing experiences. It could drive actions and data actions in Slack. It can look at better reporting, and so the whole philosophy of why we've titled this Making Everything Better is because it's really about the foundation of once that data is unified, you don't just look at Data Cloud as a value driver. I look at how Data Cloud enables everything else around the customer-facing applications that are actually going to move the needle on the metrics. So when I focus with customers on why are we doing Data Cloud, well, I actually focus on the outcomes across the business functions that we're doing it for, if that makes sense. So the whole kind of key is that it makes every application better in its own right by having a better foundational data model. The other big thing is that the AI is, you guys are probably hearing about Agent Force from every Salesforce event, everything in the market. Um, but obviously more contextualized AI agents, which can, take in information, take action autonomously, using prompts, you're able to retrieve data from Data Cloud to make more these agents more contextual within the data that they're using. And so to me, it's about like, yeah, being able to power these AI agents, for example, like a service agent on a website, and better enabling these agentic experiences, which is where obviously the future is heading. And so that kind of like bottom line that we wanted to get across in this is that this is the foundation for making everything work better together. When you have your data, all the applications work better, your analytics, your AI, which allows you to make everything better. So, Vlad, do you have any insights or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do remember the time when we were discussing, and I like that you phrased it like data makes it all better, and data cloud makes it all better in the Salesforce realm. I feel really strong about that in the sense of because number of times we discussed the whether or not it's truly the case, and whether it's a better product than something else. But ultimately, within the Salesforce ecosystem, it is still a foundation that is required for the platform of tomorrow. And it does provide that ability to truly bring up all the data components into one place and enable a
Mhm.
lot of the business level applications to get better results. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just wanted to share how I see this working. I've created like a new data and AI view of what does the future state architecture best practices look like in a Salesforce context. And to me, it starts and there's a couple different like lenses and pillars to this kind of view. To me, it's about understanding what is the gold of that data, the fuel that is going to drive the right outcomes at the end. And so most organizations have way more different types of data than ever before from when we started implementing CRM, 20 years ago, which, the whole idea was about customer 360 was always just about, I want to see like my sales service and marketing interactions. Now you have behavioral data, you have IoT data, streaming events, you have, first party, like zero party sentiment data. And it's like a lot of time that I work with organizations, this stuff is stored in many different systems. Data Cloud obviously allows you to look at those different data sources and actually harmonize that into a unified data model, right? So there is a pre-existing data model in Data Cloud that allows you to essentially unify all those different data sources into one unified model. And then it's about then being able to access that in an agentic lens. So whether that's being retrieved in a prompt, or even an experience layer like those other applications. And I think the other piece of that is about better reporting. So how can you actually understand more insights, and then it's to me a feedback loop back into the data that's being created. So I think these are kind of the core pillars of how it fits together into a solution landscape. But I think what I really wanted to focus on with you, Vlad, today is some of the biggest challenges to actually get to that target state vision where we talked about what people are trying to get to in that future state and where they're at today. Um, I just want to ask you, Vlad, like, what are some of the biggest blockers and challenges to actually achieve that unified foundation that you're seeing right now?
Look, I mean, this is a very good summary, like of the most common questions or challenges, I guess, that we're facing, and having conversations with customers, like in the last probably couple of months, more actively. Like a lot of these are pretty much repetitiveness in the sense of there is a concern about. I guess you mentioned at some point in time was like analysis paralysis. There is a desire to get to that final state, but there are considerations around the cost, around security, around value realization that are the main drivers, in my opinion, because you kind of go with the tool is available, the licensing is not a problem, it is a consumption-based product. So first thing you're going to start thinking about is, well, Salesforce is going to charge me for consuming it. I can't really attribute that or associate it with the business outcomes, and it start going into that consistent loop of going, well, I'd love to do it, but I feel like it's going to be super expensive, therefore I'm not going to do it. And then the price of not doing that still puts a pressure. And therefore, as a business, different stakeholders, different, I guess, SMEs within the business are trying to find a way to make it work. And I feel like it's getting a bit better, but there's still plenty of uncertainty and doubts around that. Like
Yeah.
the business value conversation is probably one that you and I had discussed numbers of times. Like, how do we help customers to kind of identify the real return on investment, or really even target, what the outcome should be when you're considering implementation of the data solution. And again, it could be data cloud, it could be something else. It's really, I think it's more of a structural approach to think about that. What is the outcome that is needed and why? Because it needs to align to the business. It needs to drive some business metrics, some
Mhm.
business KPI. So that is one of the common challenges that I've seen.
Yeah.
I guess cost in terms of the investment versus return on that. How do you look into what the cost would be? Because a consumption-based model for products within Salesforce Realm is still new, and customers are still quite sort of taken aback. And despite the fact that some of the pricing went down, the products became much more intelligent, and some things that used to be more expensive in the past, they actually coming down to the point where that's not really a big issue once the first initial launch is done. So helping with
Yeah.
some of these details is always, yeah, a point.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I see that people want they understand the value of what Data Cloud can bring. But the biggest thing is it can do a lot, right? It can help our sales team drive more insights. It can drive maybe more proactive service. It can help us with our marketing segmentation. It can power AI. And so they're like, okay, well, it can do a lot, but like, where do I start? Like, what's actually going to bring the most impact? And I think there's like that just trying to understand, well, where do we focus? And how do we evaluate the value of those use cases against the complexity around the credit consumption model? I've spent a lot of time. The credit consumption model is just confusing. Like there's consumption on every part of the data cloud implementation lifecycle, from the way that you ingest data to how you unify identities to segmentation activation, all consumes credits. And so the ability to actually look at the use case and understand the forecast and do estimation, it has to you have to provide a lot more clarity up front before implementation in order not to burn your credits. And actually, we're going to talk about that process now, but I see that being a big blocker to people getting started. And also, like, one of the big things is like, who owns Data Cloud in our
Yeah.
organization? Like the people there. Because traditionally data platforms have been a very IT function. Data Cloud started as more of a CDP, which is actually more of a marketing tool to do audience segmentation and activation. But now it's also the foundation for AI. It could be a service thing. You need data coming from all parts of the organization. So it's kind of this like beating heart of the organization that requires all these people and due diligence and governance around it. And so that like just that alone, people are like, wow, I don't know who's owning this and accountable. So there's definitely a lot of those things going on as well. Um,
Yeah, and early days
yeah,
when we were kind of talking about that specifically, because I do remember at the time when we were formulating not technical, but more of kind of position and the go-to-market ideas for partners in terms of how do we position that product, because it does come into competition or perceived competition with certain data products. And that was the line we tried to draw in the sense to say, like, well, it may or may not necessarily be the case, because it did in fact kind of open up the point that it becomes the heart of the actionable heart of the organization. Because from the data standpoint of view, yes, traditionally it is bound to IT. And even if you look into the implementation of data cloud today in more regulated sort of industries, like a couple of customers we work with in financial sector, for example, you've got pretty much every stakeholder from every line of business. You've got security, you've got IT, you've got marketing ops. You've got somewhat sales to come in, kind of talk about some of the things that they need to be able to interact with. And it truly shows up the value that the product can drive and enable as long as you think that way. So it certainly is a big point. And then the other side of that was, because I'd like to make a comment or read the comment rather that Vishal made, is many
Hmm.
times he mentioned that he sees a difference between the expectations versus reality for the outcomes, because the
Hmm.
outcome of Data Club is often not what the organization expected when they made the initial investments. And so for me, one thing that was, I think, one of these questions, like how to prepare teams to be ready, I think it's not just necessarily from kind of like how we're going to consume it. There's a whole lot of understanding what the product is capable of, where it fits within the organization that is not really spoken well enough or in depth early on to make that alignment across the business really right. So one of our customers made a comment, and it's after we did a few strategic sessions with them, we pretty much show them what the future roadmap might look like in their organization. And then she made an honest comment and say, like, look, to be honest, we still don't truly understand what the product is and how we're going to use it, like how it's going to help us. And I said, that's totally cool because you're not alone. And we haven't really spent enough time to actually sit down with you and formulate the practical use cases that you're going to be using it for.
Hmm.
Therefore, we're giving you the higher level view of where the influence can come in, which parts of the organization can benefit from the outcomes, but we haven't really sit down and actually worked with you and to say what it would
Yeah.
look like from the life cycle, what skills you will need to acquire, what level of operational change you'll have to apply within your day-to-day business workflow in order to actually make use of that. And to me, it was like still fresh going like, yeah, it's, 4 years plus product on the market. And I'm glad that some people have, the bravery and being honest to come and say, like, I still don't fully understand what it is. Sounds cool.
Yeah.
It's a great tool. Everyone talks about that,
But
but
the reality is it's evolved a lot. I mean, it's
yeah,
evolved, a couple years ago when it was Genie and CDP and even way back when. I mean, it's an evolution of old DMP technology to CDP, then to what Data Cloud is today. And I think, the capabilities and investment Salesforce has made has now allowed it to be that mature, capable product. But the fact is that there's a lot more now you can do on it versus years ago. And I think it's that education that helps. But oftentimes, this is actually what I want to really, hammer home. This is what we see a lot. The way that we achieve the goals that we try to set out to do is oftentimes we see people buy Data Cloud because it was thrown into a renewal. They like Salesforce just said, "Hey, here's a free license. Have a go at it." They just think that, oh, this is cool. We want to try to use this. We think it's going to be really impactful. And then they just say, okay, let's plug in all of our data. You saw that architecture, then 15 applications. Let's build all of our data into there. And then I see customers say, okay, well, like, how do we actually build everything Data Cloud is all driven based upon segmentation and activation. And those use cases are what drives the experience and what drives value for it. And insights. But actually, now that they've plugged in all the data, then they determine how to do the use cases. And then after that, they're like, okay, well, what's our return on investment? And I think actually that gets down to probably what Vishal is seeing is like, I've seen this happen a bunch of times where they're like, oh, we thought Data Cloud was going to be this amazing thing, but then we're actually not sure where the return on our investment is because the use cases aren't matching up to what this is. And by the way, we burnt through all our credits. A customer I'm working with right now burned through like 3 years of credits in like 3 months, and they're like, "Well, I think we need to unhook everything and figure out how to do this better." And what the way that I'm saying of how we should do it better is actually starting differently and starting to say, how do we want to use this? What are the goals we're trying to achieve with this? And so going in a narrow sense to say, we want to actually drive better sales insights for our team. And, we want to use those sales insights to drive better conversion and revenue uplift. Okay, that sounds amazing. Let's start there. What are the use cases? Okay, well, we actually want to target this high value segment. We want to show them this data that's actually trapped in Snowflake, which is maybe usage of our product. And we want to actually showcase that to our sales agents, our sales team. And oh, by the way, we want to use predictive AI to create a new opportunity when there's a high likelihood of a cross-sell opportunity. Great. Those are actual use cases that we can look at that are going to drive the objective of what you're trying to achieve. And then it comes down to, well, how do we need to achieve that? Okay, well, what data sources do we need? Oh, we need Sales Cloud, we need Snowflake, and out of that, we need these specific four data streams, which are A, B, and C, and D. And then, then we got to figure out, well, in terms of the delivery of this, who's accountable, who's responsible, what teams do we need to integrate that data, but also who's going to be responsible for building this segment or that data action or this content that needs to be done. And so that process is so important around who should be involved and how to enable that. I think when you start with that strategy and the why and look at this in a more narrow lens instead of the other way, which is bringing everything in and not knowing those use cases ahead of time, is to me like the best practices of how to approach it.
Yeah.
Um, Vlad, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do remember, like, I'll tell one thing is, when we were formulating this point of view, right, even between us, remember how many back and forth we went through because everyone perceives it differently. And our interpretation of what strategic objective is versus what the actual use case is versus what the actual action is and so forth, they're so drastically different. What I found sort of was helpful as well at some point in time and challenged my thinking was quite often when you go and talk with organizations that look into adopting different tools, you go and say, where in this sort of in the scale of this is a strategic tool versus this is sort of like a tactical, something that we're going to use because we need to fill the void or fill the gap within the organizational capabilities. And I found asking myself a few times, like, is data cloud a strategic investment or is it kind of like something a bit different? And to me, at this stage, I'm kind of floating towards the answer where it is a strategic capability within the business, but it absolutely has to be underpinned by the tactical applicability. And it might sound a bit weird because, yeah, I don't really have a very super clean and easy formulation of that. But what it means is, from the business standpoint of view, it's a strategic decision and investment that this tool will help us to solve some of the bigger business objectives. But in order to achieve that, you have to narrow down and focus on a very specific, very well detailed use cases in order to achieve these outcomes and start seeing the value realization. So when we aligning that pyramid between our objective is potentially improve operational efficiency of our marketing team. Why? Because today it takes us, I don't know, let's say hypothetically 4 weeks to deploy a campaign from start to end. Now, if you start underpinning a lot of these little details, the business use cases, effectively, we want to get down to in order to be able to deploy the campaign like from 4 weeks to, let's say, 2 weeks, even without going any further than that. It's a 50% increment. So what's involved with that? You start looking into there is a process, there is data involved, there are steps that need to be involved, there are people across the business, and that alignment helps to really, really shape what you're doing. And the reason I wanted to mention that is because even reading from some of the comments from Prahap and Sant as well, the placing the tool as I like that magical wand that's going to solve all the business problems. I find so many times where it absolutely is misplaced, and that leads to the completely different direction in the business. And therefore, when we look with the business even today, like some of the engagements I'm kind of running now is re-evaluating and replacing the understanding within the business when they start looking into adopting the product is what it's actually going to solve them for. Because the question around is this different or the same as any other data lake solution? How different it is from the data warehouse? We've already have a Snowflake. Like, where does the data cloud fit into that place? I'm sure, like I think we spoke with you, right? It's a very common question. So we do have a data lake. Why do we need data cloud? And some of these discussions, they sort of like they still fit into the place. And to me, a good example I talk often about that is the conversation about data cloud starts without data cloud in the conversation, because the point of that whole decision of investing from strategical point of view begins with we have a data problem in the business and we're looking into the tool that will help us solve that, right? Because if we go and say the Lakehouse is a great solution for doing a lot of data storage, crunching, it can implement MDM capabilities as part of that or an additional thing. But all in all, I compare it is I'm not going up into the wholesales to buy my groceries. I'm going to the supermarket or the corner store because I'm kind of like that business level end user who's not going to go into the lake house and write a bunch of queries and orchestrate that whole execution of the data in the way that some of the people in the organization perceive, yeah, that's fine. We've got all of these data points, but they're not actionable. They're still, as you said, locked
Yeah.
and trapped. And in order for that data to be useful for organization, for AI
Hmm.
or just business line applications, you need another tool. And that's why we feel like we need to start drilling into like, okay, here are the gaps. Let's fill them in. And
Yeah.
aligning to that
Yeah.
framework as we kind of formulated, we
Yeah.
use like exactly what helps to shape it into what is it used for.
Hmm. But that's a perfect example. I mean, when I almost every customer I've worked with like has a data lake house architecture where they have an IT team who's unifying data from a business perspective, an IT point of view. But the challenge is that how do you actually use that data to drive a marketing audience, right? Do you have to go to an IT team? Do you have to integrate that into your marketing platform in a complex way? One of the ones I just did was an agent force use case where, yeah, like there was a bunch of data in Snowflake that we wanted to surface up in an agent and be able to query in a prompt. And that it's about actually applying and accessing the data in order to drive that right use case. This data cloud is meant to be a business driven system where you can actually create insights like customer lifetime value or predictive models or audience segments that are going to make that experience across those applications better, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's really the difference and why it's important to also think like this and not in that IT driven, just this is how we're going to connect the data. It's how to apply it, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully this kind of way of thinking is helpful. I think what we wanted to spend maybe just a bit of time is actually talk through Vlad, maybe you and I can both share just a recent implementation around those four key points and maybe highlight a bit about what you've done and how that was, successful when you approached it in that top-down way, and what you saw.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so maybe one of my examples, like it was kind of like interesting because it was small organizations. It's not hugely enterprise only because I saw some of the comments and someone was asking in the chat like whether we work with enterprise or not. To be honest, it doesn't really matter the size of the customer. And this customer was a smaller financial services organization. They've been kind of on the interesting journey of adopting Salesforce for their business. They're not huge in terms of employee counts, and they self-sufficient in the sense of like their IT folks are running the things for themselves, and they're trying to be self-empowered. So very much hands-on, involved in the project, and we were super happy to work with them side by side. But the way it all started was we went through the similar framework at the start. I mean, because we come up with a bit of a predefined like methodology, and it's sort of like, okay, let's talk about the business objectives, goals, kind of see where it fits. And very similar, like, okay, we almost like we've got there's so many different things we want to do, but we'd love to connect all of these data points that we have right now, and then start looking into like where can we get a bit of an outcome. So which was really interesting to kind of go, okay, this is a very common approach, a very common framework, but it doesn't work. So we had to pivot a bit back and help them to talk a bit more in detail. Okay, let's talk about every use case that you have. Let's try to formulate the use cases with the approach of like, okay, I've got that more specific objective. And to be honest, it went down even to simplifying it to the level of what audiences that you need to configure, what insights you need to surface up in the Service Cloud against the customer profile, like down to that level in order to formulate the use case. So once we done that level of, okay, strategically alignment, okay, big vision for what needs to happen with a bit more tactical use cases, we identified, I think it was like two or three sort of initial use cases for them. And as we start looking into the data, so surprisingly for them, and more or less for us, was that for the first two out of three, we didn't even need to use unification. So it was very clear because we only needed three data sources. There were, few data points that all together ended up with a couple of calculated insights, few triggers and the flow, and make it magically appear in the Service Cloud or Financial Services Cloud against the customer profile, which in turn then drives completely different way of advisors who are using that data to work with their customers. So there's intelligence plugs in, AI plugs in, and they can now take proactive actions to service their customers instead of just trying to go up and run reports and do something like that. And the learning of all of that was, A, we didn't actually need to have a big team. B, we didn't need to go and assess all of their data points and data sources. It was very tactically executed in the sense of saying, tell us exactly what the outcome needs to be, and let's build together where it's coming from, and we can help you to fill the gap of how it needs to be delivered. It was done within 9 days altogether, like from start to end, from the
Yeah.
discovery session that we went through, finalized and formulated the outcome, and it was like a few days to build, test it, validate, and happy days. So that was one of the recent simple examples that I can probably share.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, that's crazy. And I've yeah, was just involved in one just agent force and data cloud, really quick use case that took 2 days session to just set up and get connected on some Snowflake and CRM data. So like, we are seeing to me, it's actually the execution and implementation is not as hard as the strategic thinking beforehand to say, this is what we want to achieve, this is what data we're going to bring in, and this is how we're going to use that. And then obviously there's a lot of the work around just setting up the data streams and the mapping, but it's actually the complexity is mostly a configuration and an execution on that. It's not necessarily the complex part. One of the stories I'll say is, last year I worked with a university and this to implement data cloud and agent force, and it ended up winning a global partner innovation award as the top project at Dreamforce last year in education. The whole idea at this university was they were drowning in inquiries from students. They had 50,000 students, hundreds of thousand inquiries every year. And so the goal was twofold. One is how can you essentially proactively communicate to those students and deflect inquiries from coming in using Data Cloud and Marketing Cloud. And the second thing was how can you actually make that case process handling more efficient when it came into the call center. And so that's where we actually applied Einstein for Service and Agent Force capability. And so the two goals were really just around better personalized experiences and reducing the volume and the operational efficiency. Those were the two things that we focused on. And what we did was a 10-week setup where I'll actually just kind of talk to you about it in this way because when it look at those four pillars, that's the kind of way that we took this. We said, what is your vision? Your vision is to, provide a really great service experience, deflect cases from coming in and providing students with the proactive information they need because that student life cycle is very cyclical, right? Like a lot of the times they register for classes, they enroll, they have to go buy books. And so there was all these peaks in case volumes. And so the idea was, can we actually better identify at what point a student is at in their life cycle, better segment that? And we analyzed every single case type, all the cases that were coming in, which ones are the highest volume, and tried to build segments and campaigns that would proactively deflect those cases. And so that was some of the big use cases that we targeted. And we looked at a couple different data sources around CRM, Marketing Cloud, and some of their data warehouse to be able to achieve those segments. And that's something they weren't able to actually do in Marketing Cloud. One of the things that marketers often struggle with is actually being able to get the data they need. Vlad, you just talked about this, like the time and cost to serve your audience could take 10 weeks. Now they were actually able to like use that and do drag and drop segmentation and say, let's target these people who just applied for this program, who just paid their bill, looked at something on the website, and be able to actually activate a campaign for them. So that's so important. And so when it comes to that, we defined exactly what we wanted to achieve on it, what were the right use cases we wanted to start with, and obviously what is that data inventory we have. And we prioritized. We started, like my best advice out of this would be think about those different use cases, but and think deeply, but start narrow. Start with one or two things, start with a few data sources, and then constantly evolve that. And so look at that target state solution and prioritize and accurately forecast. Salesforce just announced that they have a new credit calculator. I also use one that was created by another partner as well, if you guys want the link to that. But it's often worth going through that initial forecasting to say, hey, this is about how much data we're bringing in, our estimate about how much we want to use. Be aware that identity resolution, costs a lot more than just bringing in data. So there's certain things that cost more than others, and it's really important to do that forecasting. And then the thing that we started with was a 10-week phase one. But I always look at planning out a 9 to 12 month roadmap. It's really important to understand the vision of where you want to take this product in the long term. So maybe we want to be using it for predictive AI or retrieving it in Agentforce down the line. How can you expand out new use cases, new data sources, and all that, but also make sure that you have the right people in the place in the project delivery that are going to make this successful and drive to get that outcome for you in the future. So, I think hopefully wanted to just kind of leave this here with you today to just as you guys are approaching some of these projects to start thinking about it in this framework and this process to make sure you're getting the outcomes you want with it and not that other way upside down triangle. So yeah, so I think that was all we wanted to talk about. I wanted to leave some time for a Q&A, just to chat through. I'd love to actually hear about some of the use cases that you guys are doing on the call. And yeah, let's just open it up from there.
Jessica just shared
Oops.
a pretty good use case that they're looking at.
Jessica.
Yep.
Yeah, so client retention for onboarding education clients using calculated insight segmentation, created a segments object in Sales Cloud so our account managers can ensure their clients are hitting their onboarding milestones and if they're going off track. What has caused it has caused is it's so the sales team can action and resolve it quickly.
Nice.
Okay. Jessica, are you there? Do you want to talk sorry to put you on the spot. Do you want to talk a little bit about that use case and kind of how you're using it? I think you're on mute.
Um,
Do I need
yes.
to? Let me
You
see
don't
if there's
appear
this.
on mute, but the sound doesn't seem to come through for some reason. Oh, it's
Oh,
unlucky.
um, let me see if there's some meeting controls or something I need to do.
Shame, it's a
Hmm.
good use case.
Yeah, love to hear more about it.
That's good. That's all right. But if anyone else wants
That's
to chime
okay.
in as well, yeah.
Yeah. Is anyone else able to unmute themselves or?
Yeah. Hi,
Oh,
Zed.
there we go. Oh, okay. Hey, San, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. And thank you so much for all these tips. I would say
Yeah,
because
good.
see, we are in the very initial stage of data cloud setup at our company, and we are into education sector. So the tips you were giving about university. It really, I can really relate to it. My question is, see, once we have completed the data cloud setup, the main job is like how all the teams are using data cloud. So, like, what is your suggestion? Like, how to train those team members to better utilize the data cloud?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's hugely important. I think when it comes to enablement, like it's like you just it's similar to a marketing platform where it's not like something you set up and you use. Like, you have to constantly evolve the platform. So you need to be creating new insights, you need to be creating segments, you need to look at different channels. So, there's a lot of ways to constantly optimize the platform over time. And I think the first thing is about sharing with the people that are involved. So those having a business champion or a product owner user who is able to say, okay, we're using this for better sales insights. Let's have someone from our sales team understand what those insights need to be and how they can actually start using the platform to drive insights. Maybe you have a marketing champion who's able to create segments. You need a bit of a governance process as well to make sure that all those use cases and things fit together. And you also need to enable people on what the capabilities it can do and what can be achieved from it. So, I mean, I think having some enablement sessions, having clear owners and responsibility is really important. And having like really strong governance and thinking about it as something that needs to be evolved over time is really important.
Yeah. I'd probably extend it only to echo the point. It's good to have, because you look at the data cloud, there are the outcomes, some of the outcomes are implied, meaning that they just appear. So for example, like maybe an example like Jessica was sharing, you build the segments and salespeople not necessarily going to go into the data cloud to define the segments, but they might start seeing that segment being surfaced up in CRM as a custom object or in so many other
Mhm.
means and ways. And then once that functionality enabled, you kind of run the enablement sessions within your users to say, hey, you were not able to do it in the past. Here's what we're coming and doing today. And this is how you can actually start taking advantage of that. But extending that to the point where seeking maybe some of the input and ideas from them to say, we can do more as long as you guys have any other thoughts on what can be done. And it kind of helps to get them involved into that definition of the use cases cycles. So your development is effectively driven by someone else's business need as opposed to you trying to enforce the tools on them. And
Mhm.
I find that that usually is a great adoption factor because as long as you solve someone else's problem, then these users would usually be happy and take it on board, right? Because it helps them to do their business better and to go about their day.
Yeah. We got a question from Oana around any pushbacks from clients and how we overcame them. Um, any pushbacks that you've encountered, Vlad? I'm trying to think of a few.
Yeah, I've got two straight away. One, it's too
Mm.
expensive. And
Yeah,
that's the very
that's
first one.
I've heard
That
that a lot, a lot.
that's a
We already
very
have
common.
a data platform. This is very expensive. We're scared to turn it on,
Yeah.
and bring all our data into it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the
Um,
cost factor is usually aligned to the business value. And I try to guide conversations to always discuss what is the outcome that is being enabled as a result of implementing that. And kind of
mhm.
maybe drawing back a bit into if the data cloud is considered to be a strategical investment, but it's a tactical tool, then the outcomes that you enable are really adjusted
Mm.
or aligned with the business use cases. So if as a
Yeah.
result of doing something, you get a business improvement, whether it's a financial gain, operational efficiency, decreased cost, whatever that might be, and you balance it with what is the cost of achieving that, then if it doesn't align up, then you scrap that use case and you don't invest into that going forward. So the pricing
Yeah.
is less a concern, and I
Yeah.
think it's
And we talked about like, touching upon that, but I think we could have a whole nother hour webinar on credit consumption and best practices. But there's so many things that I know you, Vlad, and I have been involved in, and that's a lot of where the conversations and pushbacks have come from. But there's obviously a lot of best practices around obviously starting narrow with use cases, being able to do a forecast model using the consumption calculators, being able to monitor and negotiate with monitor your consumption. There's obviously negotiation with Salesforce, and I mean we can go on and on about certain ways to better mitigate some of the costs, or even technical things as well, right? Like doing limiting certain identity resolution or doing certain transformations outside of Data Cloud. So I think that's something that, requires a lot of due diligence. But, you can turn those scary conversations into something a bit more transparent. So, um, yeah.
I wanna look into as well into one of the other questions because Vishal is kind of putting additional comment, and I want to pair it up with a bit of what Jessica was talking about. So earlier today was the Marketing Cloud release webinar, and talking about Marketing Cloud Next,
Mm,
and does
mm,
most likely will
mm,
give you an impression if you've been there to say Data Cloud is definitely becoming a centerpiece product for everything you do in Salesforce ecosystem because it is a vision of the platform. And
mhm.
I guess coming a bit from the Salesforce side, one of the insights is that it is the broader vision for Salesforce to really get down to a single centralized data store, effectively to empower every line of business applications. And that's what Data Cloud really is. Agents already
Yeah,
feeding from that, and they were built on the foundation that the data is coming from Data Cloud. If you look at Marketing Cloud Next, it's that evolution of the marketing automation products that kind of build up with Data Cloud being the only data source and nothing else needs to matter. So therefore, yes, it's absolutely is the case that you do want to be across that if Salesforce is an investment for you, whether it's a career aspiration, whether you're a customer, it
hmm
certainly makes sense to be across that. But I think
100%.
one thing I wanted to say is I found that in all of my interactions and implementations, we never implemented Data Cloud in isolation, and that's to Vishal's point. So if the customer is investing into the Data Cloud, they most likely already have all other systems sitting around it. And it really, Data Cloud comes in as almost like a t-shirt that glues things together, as opposed to we want to implement Data Cloud because practically that means absolutely no value to the business. You're just creating another data mart that will just have a lot of
Yeah,
data in it. Yeah, it might look great,
yeah,
cool, very exciting experience to go up and drag and drop things and map the attributes together, but there is no action. So
yeah,
your premise is that you always start with something that is demanding the action to be taken. And therefore, the concern of cost on marketing, they're going to be there anyway. Your marketing automation is going to be there.
yeah.
Your sales and service cloud applications will be there. There are other business consumers that will be there.
Hey,
It's the
hey,
cost of
Vlad.
Data Cloud. Yeah,
We're just at time, but thank you honestly for
not a
coming and
problem.
sharing this time. Just for those on the call, if you want to hear about some of the partner innovation story, or some of the recent implementations Vlad and I have done, we are offering just a 1 hour free consultation, talk about some use cases, take you through how we've actually mapped out that data, the strategy, how we have a use case framework, putting together the target state and roadmap, something we've done many, many times. And so if you're interested and want to just talk through it, we're here to help. I will send you the link after this. It's just a lead capture form, to do that. So we're here to help. And honestly, thank you guys for joining and sharing about what you're doing. Super interesting. So
Yeah.
we'll do
Thanks a lot,
another one
everyone.
soon. Thanks for joining, Vlad, and thanks for
Absolutely.
everyone for coming.
Thanks, Chad. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Okay.
day.
Okay. We'll talk to you
Thank you,
soon.
Chad. Thank you.
Take care.